let's kick off. You want to give us a quick intro on?
Yeah, for sure. For those who've joined us, thank you so much for taking out the time to join our Facebook Live event, minimizing the impact of coronavirus on businesses. Just a quick round of introductions if you haven't been here. My name is Mo. I'm the head of support and partnerships at eShipper. The next screen there, or there, I should say, is Imtiaz, who's the vice president of marketing and sales, also at eShipper. Um, I mean, the reason we're here in many ways is very obvious, right? We're seeing it, we're feeling it. Things are changing rapidly. It's affecting small businesses. In fact, just this morning we found out that almost 50% of small to medium-sized businesses have been impacted by coronavirus. So these are very uncertain times. It's scary and confusing, and that's why we're here. We're hoping that we can share some information, some tips, tricks, ideas that can get you through this phase, help you protect what you've built so far. So in today's session, we're going to break it down in three parts. So we're going to talk about the impact it's had on the economy. We're going to talk about impact that it's had on people and workplaces, and then finally we're going to touch upon impact that it's had on the supply chain as a whole, because it's such a big part of your business. Have I missed anything, Imtiaz, in what we're going to cover today?
No, I think you've rounded up well. I think there's three main areas that we really want to try and touch on today. We want to try and support the listeners, the viewers, our customers with ideas on how to generate more income during this time. There's a lot of uncertainty in the economy and people, a lot of self-isolated individuals that are not spending as they used to spend before. So over the years, we've learned quite a few tips and tricks in the e-commerce world. And as thought leaders in this industry, we thought it'd be really, really important for us to, have that level of communication with you, to provide as many different hacks as we could, and also share a little bit of our known industry knowledge of supply chain and so on and so forth. So it's going to be very humanistic. We're trying to really afford ideas that we feel that have worked for other businesses during uncertain times in the past. And more importantly, we want to be just another voice out there, kind of putting some of the information the governments and everybody else is throwing out on a daily basis, and try and give it to you in a bite-sized manner. So thanks for that introduction, Mo. Maybe you can jump back in.
Yeah, so for sure. I mean, if there's any chance someone still doesn't know what coronavirus or COVID is, let's get that out of the way. Okay, so we know it's a viral infection that affects the upper respiratory system. It's got symptoms very much like flu, except it's very contagious and it can have some serious complications. But we know that. Just this morning I was reading on CTV is that we've had almost 700 confirmed cases in Canada, way more in the world. The medical community is doing its thing, and I think we should be doing our thing, which is obvious: sanitize, wash your hands, and then social distancing. As you can see, both me and Imtiaz are also actively practicing social distancing right now, even as part of this webinar. So I'm not really going to delve too much into this, because I think a lot of people already know what's going on the medical side of coronavirus. So we'll jump right into why we're here today, and discuss a little bit about what's happening with the economy. I know, Imtiaz, you've been keeping a close eye on the news, talking to a lot of our customers. What have you found out, and what are you seeing that you can share with us today?
Yeah, so I mean, we'll first touch on some of the consequences of what these new measures have brought to the market. So the first thing we want to touch on is the effect on the economy, and speaking to customers that are obviously a little bit wary of what's coming next, speaking to family members and friends. There's been a lot of different things going on in the economy. So the first thing we know, which is quite positive, both in our industry as well as the world, is that a lot of people, because they're home or they're self-isolating, online orders have gone up. There's less face-to-face meetings. There's less people driving on the road. So a lot of people are stuck on their phones, their laptops, or their TVs, and they're researching different things. So from an online perspective, some of the groups that I've been following online, a lot of people have been shouting out that they're seeing more and more sales in home office furniture, so ergonomics when it comes to being a little bit more comfortable with a home office. what was really crazy to see is that people are buying cosmetic ingredients, so different levels of ingredients, and trying to create their own sanitization gels and so on and so forth. And it goes hand in hand with what you're seeing out there, where either people are hoarding these type of things or exploiting sales by pushing the pricing really, really high. So we're seeing different industries doing quite well actually during this time, and most of them make a lot of sense. So I know you talked a little bit about organizations like Zoom and remote working and
Mm.
webinars
Yeah.
that are basically gaining a lot of traction because a lot of businesses are using them more and more today. Another big thing we're seeing, which is extremely positive, is that businesses are giving free services out. So Uber Eats is free of charge to use right now. Facebook has added $1 million or more in ad credit or ad spend, and they're just reducing the amount of cost a business will have when it comes to advertising, which is great to see because it just helps um, small businesses to try and utilize that time they have online, and get more audience. We're also finding companies like Fido are giving out better mobile data plans, and not charging people who go over during these times. So it's great to see that there's a negative side effect out there, but a lot of businesses are being positive and supporting. I know Shoppers Drug Mart, for example, is allowing the first hour free of charge. Well, not free of charge, sorry. They're allowing the first hour just to the elderly and vulnerable, so that they have their own time to shop, and not kind of be amongst too many people. Where we're seeing a lot of different things is in the stock market. So a lot of businesses that were skyrocketing over the last 4 or 5 years are now starting to lose a bit of their value. We're also finding that businesses that focus on disinfectants, and finding ways to really collaborate remotely and so on and so forth, are finding their stocks going up. So it's kind of a volatile time, but you can be smart in the economy, and still work with the stock market. Um, Here is some advice when it comes to small, medium-sized businesses, and really trying to gauge yourself in this ever-changing economy, and still have a stronghold on your market. So first and foremost is a lot of retail businesses have lost traction because people are not going out anymore. So set up an online store. If you don't have an online store, set something up. There are marketplaces that are offering great deals right now in order for you to be able to leverage their audience. So we have a good supporter and partner of eShip, a lady called Sarah Killings, who owns and manages a company called Shop Hamont, which is based out of the GTA. It's an online marketplace, and she's providing 3 months free on her marketplace. So look for these type of places where you can join audiences and get more traction from an online market. Another big tip is create smaller products, create bundles, things that are easy to ship and get out the door. What we've found has worked really well, actually, even before the coronavirus, and something that's working well for businesses now is the ability to provide pre-orders for clients and creating promotions. This way, you have a running start to when business does get back to normal. It also allows you to kind of understand what your customers are buying and not buying, and try and really get some promotions out there during a point where you may not have stock from your manufacturer, and so on and so forth.
Right.
Uh, get to know your employees. The employees are your machine right now. So people are in different circumstances. I have a wife and child at home, and it's difficult to be able to work the normal hours sometimes. I'm trying to get a lot more work done during his nap time. My wife is also working, and she's trying to do stuff whilst I'm entertaining him. So understand the dynamics of the guys you have at home, and really kind of work to support them during this time. Finally, I would say clean up parts of the businesses that you've neglected for a long time. So think about the future, and when things get back to normal, this is a nice time to kind of really take a step back and look at your business as a whole, and really define what you want your business to look like, mid 2020, 2021, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of times that as small business owners, you just don't have the time to do a bunch of things, and you kind of push them around, and say, I'm not going to get it done now, but maybe later. So try and get things done now, so that when business does get back to normal, you're at a flying start, and you know exactly where you're going. You have a plan. Um, Prioritizing sales channels. So I know, Mo, you had some great points on how to make sure the sales channels are
Yeah.
managed correctly.
Absolutely. In sort of in the small business world, it's only normal that we take advantage of all the different sales channels. So you've got your popular ones, Shopify's and the WooCommerces of the world, and then obviously a lot of people are also on Amazon, and therefore we usually have multiple channels. And what we're finding a lot of people are trying to do right now are they're prioritizing and looking at, because of the issues that have happened in China and so on and so forth, stock is limited. We don't know when production will resume again, and so on and so forth. So what they're doing is they're sort of diverting their stock and promoting it on sales channels that really make sense for them as a business. So some people are looking at profitability, right? And the sort of the how much it's used. Other people, for example, I just read the other day, other people are diverting everything to Amazon, because Amazon's notorious for penalizing sellers that are out of stock for a long time. So by that I mean that they won't penalize you with money, but what they're going to do is they're going to push you down the list from the first page over. So people are worried about that. That's their biggest marketing channel. So people are diverting stock. So that's something you can start thinking about during this time, because we don't know. China is back up and running, but we don't know when things will start moving again. Um, Another advice that I heard again from someone was that I thought was pretty pertinent was, usually our competitor is our competitor. We tend to not see eye to eye with them and so on and so forth. But this is a little bit of that time to really collaborate with them, because we're all in the same boat. Especially if they're in your industry, it's always worth talking to them, seeing what they're up to and how they're making the most of it. And I'm sure, us in Canada, we do love to share and make sure that everyone's successful. So that I thought was a good, icing on the cake
I
that
think
we
you're right, man. I think the fact that we're all going through the same issues right now, is there a way that we can come up with, a variety of ways, whether it's our partners or competitors, to really
can.
come up with better ways to collaborate and hopefully gain an advantage as things start to normalize. So we know from the economy point of view, the biggest hit are the small, medium-sized businesses in terms of their loss on working capital and revenue. And yesterday and the day before, I know the government and Justin Trudeau had come out and kind of spoken about some of the stimulus packages that are available, some of the different avenues that they're providing cash and incentives and so on and so forth. So I wanted to touch on three of those really quickly, just to break that down, because there's a lot of noise going on, and you may not know what your options or your availability is. So the government has announced a $82 billion stimulus package for businesses and families. 10 billion is to really support on the cash flow and credit side. So from a business to business perspective, where you may have wanted to buy something but you don't have the cash flow, or your supplier doesn't want to sell you something because he's not sure if you can afford it. EDC and BDC have a $10 billion package to be able to share across different businesses. Now, we are EDC partners, so if you have any questions, please feel free to send them over to us. You can email us, sales@eshipper.com or support@eshipper.com, and we'll get you in touch with some of our partners at EDC and really support you. And again, this conversation is all about how we can give back and how we can help you during these times. The other part the government is supporting is, I'm sure a lot of the listeners, as well as people out there, are scared that with less amount of sales, the government kind of shutting down the economy in terms of telling people to stay home. We have, employees that are either about to get laid off because we can't afford to keep them on board. We're scared that we might get evicted by our landlords and so on and so forth. So there has been a little bit of money thrown into the market to kind of support that. From a Canadian pay perspective, I believe there's about a $1,375 per employee that's being made available to pay for people who are off or not able to work at this time. And actually, there's $25,000 available for employers. So it's up to $25,000 depending on the number of employees you have. And then there's a specific pot that's being created. It's $55 billion for businesses and households to have more cash in hand. So these work hand in hand, right? If I'm an employee that is not able to come to work, number one, my employer has some extra money that he can pay me whilst I'm not working. But more importantly, the government is going to be giving me these subsidies, such as better benefits, some other areas where they would normally support you. But more importantly, you're getting things like mortgage holidays now. So banks are working to try and reduce the stress of having to pay a mortgage, or on the landlord who's expecting rent from a tenant. So please look into these. We will provide you with some links in order for you to gain more information. But a quick Google search on some of these specific topics that are very kind of prevalent to yourselves will go a long way, and we will share some links at the end just to give you a little bit more insight on that too.
I guess the overall point you're trying to make is that before we jump to drastic conclusions about your business, whether it's to do with your staff, there is solutions out there that the government have worked hard on. So let's look at that first before we jump to those conclusions. I think, Imtiaz, it's a nice segue to there's a question from one of our listeners here. How do I prepare for sourcing from secondary suppliers? At the moment, I source my product from only one supplier. I think that's a great question. It's probably got a lot of relevance to other listeners. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to thinking about your supply chain and kind of working through where the best place to go is, there's a bunch of options outside of going to China. And a lot of people right now are afraid that not only is China under lockdown or was under lockdown, but the fact that, they haven't manufactured for the last 4 to 6 weeks, as well as the fact that they're quite far away. Even if you were planning to get your product via sea, you're looking at 4 to 8 weeks. If you're looking to get it by air, it's expensive and it might take some time. Look at your distribution channel and your supplier channel within the country you work in. So, for example, we work with businesses and partners such as Spocket. Spocket is a great company. It's a North American brand. It's a Shopify app, and they work only with North American manufacturers. So you have the ability to try and reduce your effect of going outside of North America to get your products. Maybe you have suppliers within your own continent or your own country that will be able to provide you with that product.
Yeah. And there's many other platforms out there that can connect you to local suppliers. One thing to bear in mind is that, sure, the raw material might be a little bit more expensive, but you need to think about when can China start producing and actually providing you. You may be spending a little bit more on raw material, but what is the risk here? How much more business are you going to lose before you're willing to put some more aside towards your raw material? It doesn't have to be a permanent solution. It's a temporary solution, but at least now you have a secondary supplier. One more question before we continue with our topic here that I think is also very good is customers are worried about, we're in the shipping world, as most of you know. Customers are worried about contaminated, delayed shipments from supplier countries. How can we assure they're safe? Now, I've been doing a little research on this one over the past couple of days because it's come up quite a few times, is that from some world-renowned, and we can provide reference if you need at the end, world-renowned immunologists and infectious disease specialists have said that it is very unlikely that the virus on surface, if the virus was on the surface, will sustain the journey from air to sea throughout from one country to another and still be on the boxes. So that's one point to take away. Having said that, obviously, all fulfillment centers or all organizations that are handling inbounding shipments like us are taking all the precautions. So, for example, gloves, the masks, putting all inbound shipments aside and making sure that the individuals, the inbounds are fully sanitized before handling the actual package. So that's what I have seen and that's what I have found. There's not that much risk. And let's be honest, if there was a risk, the spread in China would have been much faster because it's the hub of movement of goods. Right. So sure, the impact in China was big, but it would have been a lot more faster if it was possible for people to get coronavirus through packages. Right.
I think you're absolutely right. The WHO has actually considered getting or mitigating this type of risk as extremely low. So I think you're absolutely right that there is a lot of work being done out there to kind of let people know that getting the coronavirus through products is a very low risk.
Yeah, for sure. So One final question before we move on from one of our listeners. So a lot of people are wondering, Amazon USA just announced that they are no longer receiving products. Very likely Canada is going to follow. So they're only receiving very crucial products. Uh, the question is, will you be able to provide fulfillment for Amazon orders for us if we run out of stock and so on and so forth? So just to quickly touch upon, because yes, so we are doing that for a lot of businesses today that are struggling right now because Amazon has closed the doors. So we're supporting them. Perhaps Imtiaz, you can talk a little bit more towards this in terms of what we can support right now.
Yeah, so thank you, Melissa, for that question. I've actually been in touch with quite a few different organizations over the last 24 hours who have been asking very, very similar questions about Amazon. So without this being too much of a pitch, because I am a salesman at heart, we absolutely can support you during this time. We can absolutely support just prep if you need it, and then shipping labels as standard. We can provide you just with a shipping account that will allow you to do the prep at home and get your products out at a better shipment cost. We have capabilities to support your US based customers, so it's not a problem whatsoever. My only advice would be everything is based on a case-to-case thing. I had a customer yesterday that reached out and said Amazon Europe, which is his biggest hub, is also having this effect and has shut down. And his manufacturers were based out of Germany and the UK. So I said, look, it makes no sense for you to ship your product to Canada for me to ship it back into Europe to all your customers. Instead, what I'll do is I have a fantastic partner in Germany who will be able to support you just like I can support you here. So to answer your question, we're not going to provide you a one-word answer where we say, yes, we can do it all. It's more important that we understand what your problems are, what your customer base is, where they're based, and then try and find the best route of action from there. And again, just to reiterate, if you have any questions, please feel free to email us, sales@eshipper.com, and we'll do our best to kind of give you the realistic answers and how we can support you.
So we've got a lot more questions, but we'll get to those a little later, just so that we don't get distracted from our objective here today. So we spoke a lot about the economy. We gave some very pertinent advice that hopefully will be useful to you. But another impact that this coronavirus has had to the world and to small businesses is the effect on people, the effect on workplace, the employees, the staff, and naturally so, right? Because of all the changes that we've had to make. Take, for example, eShipper, right? We've traditionally been a very in the office type of a work setup because the nature of our business, we need our departments to communicate with each other. But like everyone else, we've had to really start thinking about this work from home option, which to keep our employees safe, because that is the priority. It should be the priority for everyone where possible. So we've implemented the work from home, and for a business that's never done this before, it was a learning curve for us, right? And one of the things I want to do right now is very quickly tell you what we've done, what's worked for us, and perhaps it may be relevant to you, considering you may have to do the same thing if you haven't done that already. So one of the things that worked well for us is that we managed the expectation right from the get-go. Our staff was never used to this, so they didn't know what to expect. So we manage expectations. We, as managers, we were very clear on the deliverables, the deadlines, and what is expected off of them. And then we set up a system whereby we have a breakdown of the work done at the end of the day. And we feel like that level of clarity and transparency is not only good for your staff, but it's also good for employees. At least this way we know we have a clear idea of productivity. So that's one of the things we did there. Secondly, we did, and I think it's pretty obvious at this point, is we didn't want the collaboration aspect and the communication aspect to be affected. And what we went to is what most people went to, is make use of technology. So we started using things like Zoom, Slack, and we try and make sure that we have constant communication between our departments throughout the day through any one of these channels. So if you haven't explored these, go for it, because it's really good. A lot of these are free to use up to a certain extent, and I think they work well. They're meant for small businesses.
I'll just in quickly as well. From my perspective, managing a diverse sales team, I have sales reps that work out of Mexico, out of the US, out of the UK, and to a certain extent, we've been used to doing the remote working for sales guys, because they are out on the road, and they have this ability to, keep on top of what's going on. But we also invested in a lot of tools. So HubSpot is a great tool that we invested in, which allows me as a sales manager to kind of see what deals have been created, what leads have come through the funnel, who's followed up and who hasn't, holding people accountable, and then just making sure, like Mo said, having these collaboration tools. So we try and get on a call from an executive perspective on a daily basis, to kind of just see what everybody's up to, any news to share, any developments that are going on. And then from a sales perspective and a marketing perspective, we have a WhatsApp group. We add strategic bodies to that WhatsApp group from different departments, and it becomes a knowledge center as well as a communication center. So sometimes you don't need to go as far as investing in too many tools. There are free tools out there, WhatsApp being one of the most phenomenal we've seen. You can do your video calls on there, you can have conference calls on there, and you can have the whole team in one place at their fingertips. Now, do bear in mind, people can get a little bit carried away and start sharing a bunch of things that are not relevant to work. So you have to set the precedence, and you have to be a little bit strict on what's been going on the groups. But I think overall it's worked really, really well for us as a business, and it helps the team kind of learn more on the job as well, because you have different key people in departments kind of sharing knowledge and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because a lot of people have different departments, and how you deal with each department is pretty thing. I think one of the things that we've had to do is more on the management side of things, where we've really had to change our mindset on how we work, because a lot of us, whilst we individually in our previous lives have worked remotely, a lot of us haven't managed a remote team, and therefore what we started doing is started focusing on outcomes than activity. It is almost impossible to manage someone's time every minute when they're not in the same office as you. They're pretty much based everywhere, as Imtiaz said, Mexico, US, etc. And so what we started doing is started changing this mindset, and it kind of goes back to my earlier point, where we don't care what you're doing every minute of every day when you're home, as long as the goals are achieved, the outcome is achieved. We're having to be very flexible when we're looking at this remote working type of thing. And I think a lot of people, it's an adjustment for a lot of people managing other remote teams. Definitely has been for us, I can tell you that for sure. But we're getting good with it. And you know what? Let's be honest. It's looking like that's the future of our industry. So between the tools, between managing expectations and being very clear in terms of deliverables, that's some of what we've implemented. It's been working great so far. Our support levels, which is probably the main thing in our business, has not fallen. Quick point that I want to make here is that what we're also finding is that there's been this natural anxiety. So as Imtiaz said, employers are worried, how are they going to sustain themselves? Employees are worried if they're going to keep their jobs. Just want to bring it back, because I think it's an extremely important point. Please look at all these government stimuluses that are available, because that will probably set your heart to ease a little bit. At this point, so those are some of the points. I don't know if I've missed anything, Imtiaz, here on what we've done. Yeah.
No, I think you touched on the whole flexibility thing really well too, because I think different employees have different challenges at home, and people are kind of striving to be business as usual, but it's not easy for everybody. So I think what you mentioned about being flexible and considerate, really, really important. I want to jump into a question that's come in from JP. So, you're talking about cross-border shipments from Canada to the US and vice versa for others, US to Canada. We've seen that the border has been shut for non-essential travel. It's one of the final borders that was shut because of the amount of people and process that's going through these borders on a day-to-day basis. We are looking and watching the carriers extremely carefully right now, to see exactly what everybody is doing. The biggest thing we've seen from carriers to date is the fact that they're not taking signatures anymore, so they're trying to reduce the amount of stand time at the door if they can. But nobody has at the moment come across and said that they're not delivering packages or that cross-border trade will be affected. trade is still good to go across the border. And as far as we're concerned, we're business as usual when it comes to working with the carriers. So, JP, just to give you an answer, there are no issues right now. Just ensure that your custom clearance and things like that are being done correctly, and then just ensure that you're always prepared for an outcome where things are delayed at the border. But other than that, nothing is really changed when it comes to that. There's another good question that came up. What should next steps be for small businesses to avoid getting trapped in the global outbreak situation? Important question that needs to be answered. So I think this is something that, overall as a business, a lot of people are kind of looking at and not sure how to work with. So first and foremost, minimizing your logistical risks through forecasting, through kind of planning, looking at your supplier chain, and kind of looking at the bigger picture is really, really important. Number one, have contingency. So have a plan B, have a plan C, and a plan D, because you don't know what's coming. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about the effects of the supply chain. But the most important thing is just have some options, and speak to other people that are in the industry. Do some reading. There's a lot of experts. We're not experts. Me and Mo are not experts by any means. There are a lot of experts at EDC and BDC at the government level that are kind of giving you a bunch of ways to think about different options, and also look at different suppliers. I think Mo mentioned it earlier. There are groups and groups of suppliers in North America that allow you to buy product here from North American suppliers. It might be a 3 to 6 month thing that you need to do, where your pricing may be a little bit more expensive, but it allows you to keep the run rate, right? The business door still stays open. So it's just important to not get too stuck into your own way that you've been used to for a long, long time, and try and be a little bit different. So the last point that we really wanted to touch on today was the effect on the supply chain. And really, there are two things to think about. Okay, so you have a supply risk, and then you also have a demand risk. So your supply risk is something that everybody is thinking about right now, which is I manufacture. So 80% of global manufacturing happens in China. It's it's no surprise that 8 out of 10 of you are probably scared about what's going to happen in terms of supplier relationships and so on and so forth. So supplier risk is really important, and we talked a little bit about how to mitigate that through trying to find different alternatives in country. But the other big one you need to think about is demand risk. And demand risk, I think, is even more important, because it's all well and good having your manufactured product in your office and ready for prep and label. But if you don't have a demand from your customer base, you're in big trouble, because now you have stock sitting around. So this is something that you need to think about. And demand risk becomes much more pertinent through people being in quarantine, people being in self-isolation, people not shopping as much as they used to because of economic uncertainty. They don't know where their next paycheck will come from, and so on and so forth. So bear in mind that these are some of the things that you really need to think about. And as we had mentioned earlier, in terms of thinking about the economy and some of the things that you can do internally, these will really allow you to mitigate a lot of the risk when it comes to the demand. So a couple of things that we talked about in terms of reducing or mitigating those risks are, speak to your businesses, speak to your customers, and understand what they're thinking right now. What type of product do they need? Is your product matching their needs? Create blogs, become a voice of reason, become a voice of expertise, because what that allows you to do is keep your audience and have them kind of look to you for guidance. Most importantly, think about areas where you can multiply your audience by one shot. So think of marketplaces. We just heard that Amazon has shut its doors in the US, but there are a bunch of different marketplaces that exist out there, very niche marketplaces that you may not have thought about. And we were kind of looking at some of the experts in the industry, some of the billionaires, and what their kind of thoughts were. And one of them actually mentioned that do things that you've never done before. You have some lead time now to kind of think of variety of options when it comes to your distribution channels, the way you sell your product, and so on and so forth. So be somebody that can think outside the box and adapt. Don't kind of be stuck in your own way. So We talked a little bit about the demand risk. I want to talk a little bit more about the supply chain. So, we talked about stability, and right now we're at a point where a lot of our eggs are in one basket. The stability of the markets are low. We don't know when the next shipments are coming in, but have a thought process on, if you have a container load of product coming in, have your supplier maybe air, 5 or 6 or 10 of those smaller boxes to you in advance, so that you have a little bit of product before your container arrives. Think of, a variety of different ways. One thing that's really resonated from our perspective is that, US is a huge marketplace for all our customers, and a lot of our customers also have fulfillment hubs and warehouses in the US. Now, when you're bringing your product in, it doesn't have to go into the US as the first port. You can come through Canada and go into the US from here. And we have a variety of solutions and tools that will help you to do that, because the US, having this massive population and a big business economy, always means that there's going to be more and more products going through their borders. And one thing that you need to bear in mind is that you don't always have to go through the first border if that's your destination country. We can bring things through Canada, and actually we don't even need to custom clear them before they get into Canada. It's called being in bond, and being in a sufferance facility, where you don't have to custom clear it, and we can get a truck that also has the same bond that allows you to hold product before custom clearance, and maybe go through a different border entry from Canada into the US rather than from China into the US directly. So there are a variety of tools. Please keep your eyes and mind open to this, and reach out to us if you need any support when it comes to that type of thing. In terms of thinking outside of the box, we talked a little bit about using air instead of sea. And if you are using sea, insure your products. Insurance is not as expensive as most people think it is. It's actually extremely cheap when you go to the right type of organizations on sea as well as air. You have a huge product set that's going to be coming in at one go from China or India or Indonesia or wherever you're manufacturing your product. If it's outside of Canada, think about insurance, because if anything does go wrong, if there are delays, if there is any damages, that's your first batch of products coming in. Ensure that you have your own back, and think through how you can insure those. One last point that I really want to touch on is plan for what if scenarios. So think about diversity. If something happens, what can you do instead? Don't hold all your eggs in the same basket. I said this before, right? It's try and be as outside of the box thinking as you can. We had some advice from Mark Cuban, actually talking about working with your competitors. I know Mo mentioned this earlier too. It's not a bad idea. Think about how they're bringing their product in. If you're selling the same products, it might not be a bad idea at this point, where we're all coming together as a country united to think about how you can get better economies of scale overall, and how you can really utilize some of those relationships that you have. So we work quite closely with some of our competitors in terms of how to prepare our customers and our employees, and kind of using best practices and so on and so forth. So you should absolutely do the same, and think outside the box rather than kind of being stuck in the old ways that you've been when things were settled down.
I think a relevant point to exact that point, and I think it's also one of the questions as well, is that has all this really impacted any sort of movement of goods from international or domestic? So the blunt answer is no. When we look at the carriers and we look at all these providers, they're on as usual. What they've done though is they've minimized contact, minimized touch. So for example, some of our carriers, not some, pretty much all the carriers now are not allowing signature, right? They're going to come, drop the shipment, and off they go. Same with international shipping. When you look at this, this is a term, by the way, Imtiaz, I heard yesterday, belly cargo. I don't know if you knew about this, but any cargo that comes in the belly of a passenger flight, basically. So that's coming through normally. Sure, some flights have gone down, but that's more for human movement. As far as commerce is concerned, so far, touch wood, nothing has changed. So there's not that much that we've heard right now that should alarm you so much. The only part of the supply chain that is concerned right now is the manufacturing side of things, whereby because a lot happens in China, There's delays, they're slowly coming back, but I don't know how far down the list are you until they get to your product. So kind of comes back to all this advice that Imtiaz just dropped
Yeah,
on us.
to touch on that with China, guys, we're hearing some really great news in China right now.
Mm.
So I think 80 to 88,000 people were diagnosed with COVID-19. Less than 2 to 3 months ago, and I hear that 60 to 70,000 of those are back out in the workforce. I was reading a touching story yesterday of a man who had caught a fish. He was sitting under a tree with all his friends, and they were kind of perplexed at the fact that just weeks ago or days ago, they weren't even allowed out to see each other. And now these are people in their 70s and 80s were able to kind of go back to the norm of catching fish and eating together and joking and telling stories. So China is coming back to life. Obviously, the effects of what happened there are now being seen across the world, this ripple effect. But you can be rest assured that, a lot of things are going back to normal there. I hear that transport between provinces is normalized. People are allowed to kind of travel more, see their friends, so on and so forth. So there is some great news coming in from China in regards to that. And hopefully that should be able to help you guys with your stock issues and so on and so forth. So let's jump into some questions more, if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure. So we've got a couple of questions here that I think we can touch on, and then we've got some questions from through emails that I think we can touch on as well that are important. So uh, one of the things is here is wondering if Canada Post will do pickups as drop-offs aren't ideal with the current situation. So obviously, this is a very Canadian-based question, but also very relevant because they're one of the largest carriers for e-commerce businesses. Again, we haven't heard anything different from Canada Post. So far, pickups, as it used to be, you pay for pickup. They're not doing any free pickups. Drop-off locations are still open, so no changes there as well. They've obviously heightened how they deal with your packages, how they deal with you as an individual. So that's obvious and is happening. But that's what I have seen. I don't know if you've seen anything different, Imtiaz.
No, I agree. I
Yeah.
think
Okay.
from a carrier perspective, a lot of things are business as usual, and we need these guys to really work really well. So if somebody is delivering something to your house, make sure you leave a thank you note, man. These guys are putting their lives on the line. As for whether Canada Post will pick up from you, if you're an eShipper customer, most of you are using our warehouse for Canada Post and so on and so forth. It's business as usual. But above and beyond that, I can't emphasize this more. Whilst we have these delivery drivers in their trucks doing what they do, we are all able to get things delivered to our houses. So, have some gratefulness and leave some notes, some thank you notes, and so on and so forth for these guys because they are doing a phenomenal job. And I hope that we can keep that business going as long as possible because we all need it in one way or the other.
There's another question here. Again, I think we touched on this briefly, but just because there's a question on concern amongst certain businesses whether to handle anything that's come in from any of the foreign countries that have been impacted by this. Once again, as we said earlier, there is absolutely no evidence, or the evidence is very, very low that this can be transmitted through handling boxes. Having said that, however, most businesses or most fulfillment centers like ourselves that handle boxes are taking all the precaution to quarantine inbound shipments and handle it with masks and sanitize the boxes and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
However, there's no evidence, so to speak. I think those are the main. Let me just see here. We're getting a bunch of questions around here. I'm just checking if there's any more that I think would be relevant to everyone.
About international shipping, where the
Oh
ship coming
yeah,
in,
yeah, yeah.
going out. As we know from the government to date, trade will not be affected when it comes to cross-border coming in or going out. It's more about controlling human movements. So just to answer that question, Blair, there have not been any foreseen issues when it comes to international shipments coming in or going out. But as these things tend to change, we will keep you posted and we will try and update you as much as we can.
Uh, we've got another one here. Is what kind of business continuity plans do you have with respects to already placed orders and for the new and upcoming orders in order to deliver effectively? Go for it, MJ. What do you think?
So I sent out a message a couple of days ago. Our warehouses are working as usual. They're all having a bunch of different methodologies when it comes to sanitization and making sure that they're monitoring employees to check for any illnesses and so on and so forth. But we're going through some record number of shipments through our warehouse over the last week. Makes a lot of sense because a lot of people are online and shopping. So to answer your question, right now we have allowed most of our employees that can work remotely to be remote. Our offices are completely empty when it comes to employees working at a desk. So those are the consideration and contingencies we've made for our staff members. As for the warehouse, depending on what the government comes in with legislation or changes, we will abide by those. But for now, we've equipped them all with masks, with gloves. We're asking them to, get out of their workstations often and go wash themselves and make sure that they feel clean and happy. They've all got wipes. They're working and cleaning their workstations every half an hour. So the idea is that, we're working at capacity from a warehouse perspective, and we're trying to keep business as usual so that our customers feel like they still have a fighting chance during this period.
Okay, perfect. So please, obviously, right now I'm not seeing any, but please keep on coming. Just want to almost some concluding remarks from my end before I hand it over to you, Imtiaz. Just want to reemphasize why we're doing this. We touched on this earlier, but we're doing this because we work with a number of small businesses. We've had our ears and eyes to the ground, seeing what's happening, and we felt that it's pretty important to share this information to the others out there that are probably in the same boat. So that's why we're here. We'll continue to monitor this. As Imtiaz said earlier, really want to sort of encourage everyone to look at what's out there, what the government's put around, what other organizations are doing during these uncertain times to help small businesses, because there is a lot of support. There's a lot of information we have that we couldn't touch on today. But if you're interested, you can give us a shout. You can reach out to us directly, or you can email us at support@eShipper, sales@eShipper, anything. We'll drop some information on the Facebook group if you want to contact us directly for any sort of questions. Imtiaz, any final remarks?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for your online businesses out there is we have your back. Whether it comes to the shipping and fulfillment side, or it comes to just knowledge and consultation and giving you advice. Mo and his team have done a phenomenal job in partnerships and ecosystem building, which has allowed us to really, grow our thought process, our knowledge base. A lot of these partners are going through the same issues that we are. I was just speaking to 3 of them yesterday. They're all working remotely. They're all getting the same questions. So what's really, really important from our perspective is that we have a wealth of knowledge. And if we can't answer your questions directly, we'll pass you on to the right people who can answer your question. We're one of the only organizations in Canada that is actually collaborating with Export Development Canada, who has been provided a stimulus package directly for injection into businesses. So we have a bunch of means at our disposal, and we want to be not just a partner that provides you a service from a shipping perspective, but also a caring partner that can answer your questions and help you kind of get solutions and advice and so on and so forth from some of the other business partners that we work with. I see one question just came in from Neelam. Would the shipping rates remain as competitive as before? This is a great question, Neelam. We actually sign our rate agreements with carriers for either a year or 3 years, and they're locked in. So pricing is not going to change due to the outbreak. However, if carriers need to change their pricing based on demand and supply, or if they have anything extra that they need to do due to their processes, we will keep you guys posted. These are things that we will only realize as time comes through. So nothing that we have planned specifically. In fact, if anything, we want to try and be able to support you and give you more for your money. So that's some of the activities that we're looking at. In the future, we have some phenomenal programs coming up for shipping and thinking outside of the box when it comes to shipping. We're actually using a lot of the downtime to do a lot of prep for that. So Neelam, to answer your question, will shipping rates remain as competitive as before? I, for one, can guarantee you that they will be even more competitive because we're adding more product to the marketplace and we're being a little bit more thoughtful of our customers and where their shipments go. So hopefully, once we start to push those messages out, you'll be able to see much more in terms of options of shipping and to be even more competitive shipping outside of Canada and within Canada.
Thanks, Imtiaz. And I think I couldn't have summarized that better. I think on just to end this, thank you so much for taking out the time once again. Stay safe, stay stable. We're here for you if you need any help. If you're a small business, uh, be safe. Wash your hands. See ya.
Absolutely. And just to end on a quick note, we are going to be sharing some of the links that we've discussed in the comment section. So look out for those because those are going to be important for you to kind of go back and reiterate some of the things that we have found. And most importantly, feel free to touch base with us. I know we've stuck a toll-free number out there, but try and get through to us by emails as much as you can because emails are really important right now. Where a bunch of people are working from different areas, but we have different triages on the email side. So support@eshipper.com or sales@eshipper.com are your two best ways to communicate with us. And we are business as usual. Our guys are working tirelessly on a day-to-day basis. You are our main concern. We understand it's your livelihood. So we're very excited to be able to support you during these times. And we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.